Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Salma and I'm a mom of six. This channel started out initially as a way to document my family's journey with learning Quran, but lately it has evolved in me talking about, raising a Muslim family and, all things related to that. I'm going to be starting a new series on how to run a large Muslim family, and there's going to be multiple parts addressing all the questions I've been getting lately. So let's get started, inshallah. A bit of a background to get started and why I want to talk about this kind of stuff is I come from a family that wasn't large. I don't come from a traditional Muslim large family. I come from a family that had 3 kids, which was quite big considered. But there was a large gap between me and my siblings. My siblings are 12 and 14 years older than me. So I pretty much grew up as an only child. I had no siblings rivalry. My siblings were grown. They had their own lives. And my mom was a working mom, so I didn't have that traditional upbringing. My husband comes also from a very small family. He only had one brother. So when we first met and discussed our family vision, we talked a lot about wanting to have a large family, right? But we didn't come with it from any experience. We didn't come with it, from an idea how we wanted to get this done, right? And so being a reader, I turned to books and courses and different kind of things, how I wanted to tackle this. And so today I want to talk about the things I've learned over the years. So we have 6 children now, alhamdulillah. My oldest is 22, my youngest is 7. We have, the full age range. And I wanted to talk a little bit about things that are not so common anymore. So first of all, it's not common anymore to have a large family, right? For different kinds of reasons, for socioeconomic kind of reasons. And so this experience is kind of missing from the space, from the Muslim space. Now, there are 2 types of people, 2 types of categories you might fall into. You might fall into the group of people who never grew up in a large family, like I did. I never grew up in a large family. I never knew this kind of logistical stuff. Or you might be somebody who has grown up in a large Muslim family, but you took things for granted. Maybe your mom was just an amazing housewife and, amazing home caretaker, and you just it felt natural. But now that you're on your own, you're kind of struggling, right? And you might be wondering how to get this done, right? And so I think this type of knowledge is missing, because this was maybe something that used to be transmitted from generation to generation in, particular corners of the world, in their villages, grandma to mom, mom to daughter. But now we live very separate lives. We live in the nuclear family. Not many people are having large families. And so this knowledge is kind of getting lost. So let's define what a large family means. Most people are very, reluctant to have children these days. And so when me and my husband talked about having a large family, we thought, multiple kids. But we also thought, okay, let's take it one kid at a time to kind of see how we're going to handle all this kind of stuff. We ended up with 6, alhamdulillah, which is a huge blessing. So large might feel different to you. You might be struggling with a large family of 2, if that's not something you're used to, or 3 or 4, or for somebody 6 might sound like, oh, that's nothing, everybody around me has 10 plus, right? So it's a very individual definition of what you might consider large, right? But most people nowadays have 2 kids, 3 kids, right? That's kind of the average in the Muslim community as well, right? And so you have to kind of define for yourself where you cross into the large family territory, right? I've done some videos, previously. You can check it out on my channel in terms of defining your family vision, what kind of family you want to run, how it is going to go, what are your goals with your husband. So you need to sit down and kind of give it some thought. And, as Muslims, we are encouraged to have a lot of children, but again, the times have changed, right? And so it's not easy. Depending where you live, you might have a hard time, maybe both of you have to go work, or even if there's a one single income provider, if your husband is the only one going to work, or if you might be the only one, it gets financially quite difficult, right? And so the definition of large, we'll leave it up to you, even if it's 2 kids or 3 kids. But if you're somebody like me who has been wanting to have a large family but didn't really know where to turn for practical advice, maybe this will be the place for you, inshallah. So there's kind of 2 type of content I want to make to kind of make it clear. One is the more sort of theoretical or philosophical side of it. Why would one want to have a large family? Or, it made sense when people lived on farms or when people had large pieces of land, or when it was a matter of survival, right? The more heads were there, the more hands were there, people could, help each other, and so it was a matter of survival, right? But nowadays in the modern society, it almost seems counterintuitive. Everybody kind of bombards you with that idea. Well, why would you have so many children? It's too expensive, and it costs so much to raise a child, and these kind of things. So there's that philosophical background. Why would one even embark upon having a large family? And what I've noticed in the Muslim community, that maybe a lot of people come from large families, but the mothers in those large families are now encouraging the daughters to slow down, to kind of reduce the numbers, right? And so maybe because of their struggles and their bad experiences, they're not encouraging their daughters and sons to have multiple children, right? And so you have to kind of dig deeper on this. What is your upbringing? What is your idea on having a large family? How does that look like in your head, right? And so ideally, you'd be embarking upon this, as you're starting your marriage, as you're discussing your marital meeting questions, with the future spouse, is this something that you want to pursue? And, how do you want to go about that, right? And so me and my husband were quite clear in the beginning. We talked about it, that we wanted to have a large family, that we loved kids, that both of us enjoyed being around kids, and that we wanted, and then we missed out in our relatively small families, and this is something we wanted to pursue. Now, quite early on, we also had to discuss, that would mean me staying home, that I would be the primary caregiver. Now, that's, I think, the default is sort of in the Muslim community that the mother stays home, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, right? There are multiple ways how you can handle it, and sometimes mothers want to study or pursue their work, and there's plenty of Muslim mothers who have successfully balanced both. But in our case, we both decided that while I would be pursuing my education further, and I would always have something on the side, I would always be teaching or having some classes or having some involvement in the community, I would be the primary stay-at-home parent. And when you have a large family, it becomes very important that you have somebody who's primary there for the kids. When you have one or two kids, it's almost easy to juggle. Like you could manage, with both parents being, working parents, and just kind of playing ball and, between the kids. But once you have 3, 4, 5, 6, it becomes logistically much more important to have somebody who is at home full time. So that's also something to consider. So if you're considering a large family, if that's something that's on your mind, you have to kind of give it some thought. Okay, who is going to be the primary care provider? Who's going to be staying home to make things easier? Now, we've had different phases in our marriage. There was times where I would be working, and there was times where my husband stayed home while I was pursuing my education. And then, I was at home, and then I was working part-time. And then once we had 2 kids, it became apparent that me being outside the home was not what we were looking for. Somebody had to spend time with the children, somebody had to give them that attention, and we decided that I would be primarily staying home. Now, if you are looking at a single income sort of model of functioning, this is going to require some sacrifices, right, on your family's behalf. But again, we as Muslims, we believe that the risk is from Allah, and that each child carries its own risk, like its own barakah in that sense. And alhamdulillah, it is doable, but you have to do some planning and some thinking and some organizing yourself, right? And that's the bit of the large family logistics I'd like to discuss here, right? And so you kind of decided this is kind of the path you want to pursue. And I think it's important to keep in mind your health, number one, because, if you keep giving birth multiple times, this is quite relevant. If, multiple pregnancies are going to be affecting you, to kind of keep rechecking every couple of years. How are you doing as a mom? Is your health okay? Can you continue on with the pregnancies and the births? And as a midwife, this is where I also see the importance of having natural births, and, the importance of breastfeeding, and that full package, right? So the idea is not just to give birth and, as a machine and keep going. This is something, where people say like, oh, it's okay to have multiple C-section and these kind of things. Those are all big things to consider. So even the pursuit of natural childbirth then becomes something important if you want to have a larger family, and if you keep wanting to invest in this venture of, having lots of kids, inshallah, right? And so those are sort of the philosophical kind of things that then start to get into the practical things, like who is going to be the provider, who is going to be staying home, what kind of births are we planning, what about breastfeeding, what about the physical toll of having multiple children, right? And that's something that's important. And then you kind of get to the idea of, can I even handle it? If I can handle life with 1 or 2 children, isn't it just going to get crazier? why would I do this to myself? And this is something, I'd like to address in this channel as we go forward, tips and systems and goals and how to set up your life, in a successful way, so you can enjoy your large family, so you don't have to be just that kind of mother who's just overwhelmed and upset. And maybe this is something we've seen in the elder generation, that their lives of struggle, and sometimes the younger girls just say like, hey, I don't need this, like, why would I pursue that? This was just too much, right? And so I'm here to kind of showcase the other side of it, maybe the example that women can thrive even as mothers in large families, and that's maybe something that's not being portrayed nowadays, right? And maybe some of the younger sisters are looking forward to these kind of lifestyles, but they're not really seeing the examples, as I wasn't seeing them, right? And so even in my own case, my mother was quite concerned that I kept having all these children, right? Because that's not something she was used to. She was concerned about my independence. She was concerned about my health. She was concerned about so many different things, right? And I totally get that. And so I think as a society, we have changed, and this is not the default anymore, right? And so we have to kind of, in my family, I'm sort of the first generation now who is staying home, who is raising this large family after a gap, right, of people having 2 kids and just, having their independence and being working mothers, right? I've done the opposite. I have decided to stay home. I have decided to have all these children, right? And so it's kind of a new path that we're pursuing. And maybe, again, for you, you come from a culture where this was the norm, but I see this also in the Middle Eastern culture or the Asian cultures, that the things are changing, that there's more encouragement for women to be independent, to go to work, to not have large families because of the economic burden. And so it's quite a difficult choice. So if you are someone who is interested, in how to raise this large family, I'm going to be doing a couple of videos on this topic, inshallah, how to kind of run your household better and how to develop these kind of relationships in your family. And one of the things I just want to leave you with, this is just kind of meant to be an introduction, that raising a large family is rather, it's not just like a short trip, but it's not even just a season, but it's like rather a large voyage, right? And so sometimes maybe when people have 1 or 2 children, then it's kind of like, okay, the early years, and then they go to school, and then it's kind of finished, right? The trip is very short. But in case of a large family, and particularly if you choose to homeschool, and particularly if you choose to kind of pursue this other lifestyle, right, of being a bit on the other side of what the society sells as success, it becomes quite difficult to organize yourself because there's not many role models who are pursuing that kind of lifestyle. So I'm hoping to fill that gap, inshallah, to have these conversations on, how you could structure your life with this idea of having a large family, raising Muslims, teaching your kids Quran, basing your life upon the deen, homeschooling, doing all these things that are making you thrive as a Muslim woman in that whole picture, rather than just suffer and carry the burden. And the topics are going to be then, stuff related to marriage as well, to your relationships, to how to have a relationship with your children, because the point is not just to give birth and then be miserable and not have a relationship with your kids, but rather to raise these kids well and to have a continuous relationship with them as adults, inshallah, and to create that multi-generational sort of effect where we pass on our faith to the next generation, and, where we create this beautiful circle of large families who are upon the deen, inshallah, right? And I think that's a bit missing because of the situation that, a lot of us have been through, maybe the immigrants who have come to the West, and, the difficulties they've gone through, and that knowledge and that experience has been lost. So I kind of come from it from a bit of a self-learned perspective, because I didn't grow up with this. So I had to be very intentional when I embarked upon the path of being a mom. Okay, how do I do this? I don't really have a role model in sense of like, yes, my mom was there, but my mom was a working mom. My mom came from a very independent streak of women. And so, again, I'm not saying that I'm not independent, but like, for the purpose of learning how to run a large household, how to have multiple children, how to teach them at home, there was no example, unfortunately, right? And so this is something that you might have the same issue with, and so I'm hoping that this channel will kind of be that bridge, and then we're going to be discussing things that are there. And so I just want to kind of leave you with one thing before we embark upon the future videos, inshallah, of this series on how to learn a large Muslim family. This idea, and I'm hoping this will stick with you as we proceed further, you cannot do any of this if you do not take care of yourself. Right. And so you cannot be giving, you cannot be the selfless mother who sacrifices her career, who sacrifices maybe her family, her time and her health, in giving birth to multiple children without filling your own cup, right? And without having any boundaries, and without everybody walking all over you, and with you having no voice. And right, so for you to thrive in running a large Muslim family, a big factor will be to take care of yourself, to have some boundaries, and to set up systems, to have goals, to have vision, but to also set up systems that support you in this journey, inshallah. And we will be going through this in the next couple of videos, inshallah. So I hope this will serve as an introduction. And let me know in the comments if you have any specific questions you'd like me to answer when it comes to having a large Muslim family and running it successfully, inshallah. All right, I hope this helps, inshallah, and I will see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.